verse-by-verse study of them. And Abraham journeyed thence toward the south country and dwelt near between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, "She is my sister." Have you heard that one before? And now I have used this, I pronounced this word Abimelech for a long time. And then I looked it up today, how it's supposed to be pronounced. So I will try and see if I can change my thinking to how it's supposed to be pronounced. And it's supposed to be pronounced Abimelech. Abimelech. So we'll see if we can, I don't know which one we'll use. But it's good. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said unto him, "Behold, thou art a dead man." Let me rephrase that. He came to him in a dream and said, "Behold," the bed shook, the earth shook, Abimelech shook, and thou art but a dead man. That'll wake a person up. And he said, "For the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife." And Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, "Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation?" Said he not unto me, "She is my sister." And even she herself said, "He's my brother. In the integrity of my heart and the innocency of my hands have I done this." And God said unto him in a dream, "Yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart. For I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffer I thee not to touch her. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. If thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine." It's kind of serious. Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants. Now, you can imagine how early. And called all his servants and told them all these things in their ears, and the men were sore afraid. And Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, "What hast thou done unto us? What have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done." And Abimelech said unto Abraham, "What sayest thou, that thou hast done this thing?" Abraham is a mystery sometimes. Abraham he did this one time when he went to Egypt, about 20 years earlier. I think it was somewhere around Genesis 13. And he did this when he went into Egypt. Now, I can a little bit understand maybe when he went into Egypt, they were 20 years younger. I understand Sarah's 90 years old at this time. But there's a lot more going on here in this text than just that. Not only did Abraham go into Egypt and God had to take care of him and Sarah. And ladies, you have to love Sarah. She's just, okay, whatever you say, honey. You know, believe me, it's a little different back then than it is today. And another thing we have to understand here is that this was not an uncommon thing. And if you look back at the life of Solomon, for example, what would happen back in those days, kings would take the daughter of other kings, and that joined their nations together. They had a relationship now. and so they wouldn't war against one another. Of course, Solomon took 700 of them, and that might have been a little bit more than was necessary. But it appears to have been something even in the days of Abraham, and this is like 2000 BC. These are things that happened. And so get the history up to date. Abraham has what has just happened in chapter 19? We have the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, the cities of the plains. But in the first part of chapter 19, we have something else that's very, very, very important. Remember? We talked about it a little bit last week. In the first part of chapter 19, God, for the first time, tells Abraham that Sarah is going to give him a boy. Now, he's been told all along that he's going to have a child. He's going to have an inheritance to give to one of his children. He's been told about all of this. It's going to be passed down. His seed is going to be as the stars in heaven or the sand of the sea. He's been told this all along. He knew he's going to have an inheritance, and he thought that this little deal that they had played with a handmaid would work out for him. But God said, no, that isn't what's going to happen. Sarah is going to have a child, a son for you. And then we go down and we find that they have destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, and you know all the story. I'm not going to mention the other man's name. It starts with an L. But Abraham now has packed up all of his people. Now, Abraham, if you remember, probably has a couple thousand people handling a very large herd of sheep and cattle. Abraham had just earlier in chapter 14, I think, was it? 14, anyways, had just went to battle against Chedorlaomer, if you remember that, who had come over from Babylon with 4 other kings, or 3 other kings, and had come around the east side of the Jordan River, down under the Dead Sea and back up, and had taken captive the cities of the plains, the people and all the things, and they took the man with an L's name with him and the family. And Abraham, what Abraham did was, he went and gathered 318 men out of his own servants and took off after this guy, caught him in Dan, and chased him for about 100 miles north and gathered all the people back. Abraham is a mighty warrior with God behind him. And now we find him kowtowing to this little king. And so we come, but there's so many things again. Remember, Sarah is either just now pregnant or soon to be pregnant. And he has just turned his wife over to another man. Now, is he trusting God that much? Or is he that foolish? I know that when he left Egypt with a lot of money and a lot of cows, and his wife intact. God preserved her. It's amazing how God loves people and takes care of them. As I study these and I see this, I marvel sometimes how men in our ignorance allow things to happen, and then God steps in his majesty and his glory and his wisdom, and he handles it and takes care of it. So now what's happened? Abraham has left Hebron, basically where he was, and he has moved down past Beersheba, down further south, and he goes down almost into the wilderness of Sur and up by Kadesh. And it says here that in this verse that he dwelt there. In other words, he has a large, when he moves, this is a major, well, not a major city today, but this is a city like where I grew up, that was close to the farmland where I grew up. You know, a couple thousand people. When he moved, it was a big deal. And it was within him to do that. When you have sheep which is most farmers hate sheep. You see a lot of them around, but sheep and cattle don't mix. Sheep will just eat the grass by the roots, and you won't have grass for cattle to feed on. So, but what happens is they clean the land where they are, and he has to move different areas just to keep his cattle and everything going. You understand that? But it was also within him, given to him by God, to travel throughout the land, because his family would be possessing that land. And so we find that Abraham has left now and has gone down south and has come back up to a place called Gerar. Anybody know where that is? It's in the news today. Gaza. Gaza, this is just south of Gaza, right there. It's the land of the Philistines. I was thinking the other day, in 135 A.D., a Roman king named Hadrian hated the Jews. Some believed he was homosexual. He came into Jerusalem. There was a little uproar. He came into Jerusalem and killed another 500,000 Jews. This is after 70 A.D., when Jerusalem was destroyed by Titus. Hadrian come in, and he destroyed Jerusalem again. And he was so angry at the Jews, he asked who were their most hated enemy. And it was the Philistines. The Philistines. So he changed Israel's name in 135 A.D. to Palestine. And until 1948, May 14th, 1948, it remained Palestine. A lot of the old commentaries I read, they call it Palestine. Palestine, Palestine, because at that time when they were writing, that's what it was. But the Philistines, I want you to understand something in your mind. When Joshua brought the children of Israel into the land of Canaan, they were to conquer the land. Dan was set up just north of the Philistines, and Judah was just to the east of the Philistines, and they were to take out the Philistines. The last person that fought the Philistines was Samson. And when Samson died, Dan packed up their little ditty bag and they headed to the north country up by Syria. No one has ever conquered the Philistines even today. That is Gaza and those Palestinian people that are in that area today. Abraham has made his way around there, and this is long before all those that was there. And there was evidently a good king there. In our second verse, Abraham said to Sarah, his wife, she's my sister, and king of Gerar sent and took her. Well, that's it seems like there should be a lot more said, but he took her. Abraham said she's my sister. We're going to find out next week that Abraham explains this. He says that she is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother. So she is his sister. How did that happen? Terach, his father, had two wives. One wife had a daughter, and he had 3 sons. Abraham married his sister from not his mother, but from another mother. Now, you say, well, that's, back in those days, they didn't have many people to choose from. And that's how they were working. Actually, if you look at the patriarchs, whenever Abraham wanted to go pick a son for a wife for his son, he went back to Haran and Padam-aram, and he found the family there, and a wife was chosen, Rebekah. When Jacob left Rebekah's side and he took off back up to Padam-aram and found a wife there, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah, and he really brought in a family. But here's what we find. We find that Abraham has journeyed now. He's back up here. He's settling in. And then we find that Abimelech had a dream. God came to him in a dream. I want you to know God loves, God takes care of Abraham, but I want you to also know God takes care of Sarah. Sarah, when we get to the last of the chapter, we'll find that God had brought a disease in or something in that shut up the wombs of all the ladies in this kingdom. And there was something went on physically that to the people that they didn't really know about what was happening, how it was happening. And we'll see how God that releases that from them. But they were never going to touch Sarah. She was never going to be touched. God took care of that. But here we find that he is woken up in a dream. And he said, "Behold, thou art but a dead man." Okay. Believe me, this king knew it was God speaking. Remember, this is not the first time. I wrote about this a while back, and when God wakes you up. There's times, if you look, there are times when God allows you to sin. Now here in this case, he did not allow this man to sin. He woke him up before it happened so that he wouldn't sin against God. But can you remember a time when God woke up a king after he sinned? Remember when Samuel came to David and said, "Thou art the man." David he just thought life was going on. Everything was fine. He just committed adultery, committed murder, and he thought everything was going to be okay. It's all hidden. Nobody knows about it. This is all a secret. And then, "Thou art the man." Oh. And do you know, because of that sin, it followed David everywhere he went for the rest of his life. And even on his deathbed, a son tried to steal the kingdom away from him. And God had to bring it back into Solomon's hands. "Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me?" Woke him up, right? So God wakes people up, and I'm glad that God wakes people up. I'm glad God woke me up to salvation. How about you? How about you? I'm glad that it was a definite thing that happened in my life that I will never, ever forget. I'm glad God wakes people up. And in this case, I'm glad God woke this man up, that he would know and see what was going on. "For the woman which thou hast taken she is a man's wife." So the word "behold," I believe, just shook him up to the roots. "And thou art a dead man." Well, remember Daniel when he was a Belshazzar? Mene, whatever, Tekel, Upharsin, it says, "Thou art weighed in the balances and found wanting." There's times when God shakes people to their very soul and wakes them up. This man here, believe me, was awake and was trying to figure out what was going on. The woman which thou hast taken was another man's wife. The warning was not because of Abimelech that he had done anything to the woman, but because she had taken without further examination. He just took her. He didn't examine her that much. And you have to understand again, Abraham, I tell you all the time, I try to put my feet into the shoes of these men in the Bible and try to see what's going on in their mind. And I don't know, Abraham is a great man. He's a nation unto himself. Why was this necessary? The only thing I could think of was that he didn't have a daughter to give. And so I don't know what else it was. What else could there be? I don't understand it. But he did it. And now this man's having to pay for it. But he had not come near her. And he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? What is a righteous nation? If you look at the words, what is righteous? What is righteous? Righteous means just, lawful, righteous. It's a law. Now understand, how did this country become righteous? Laws of nature. I don't see where this man could be considered a man of God, though they had Noah, who lived a righteous life, and they had examples, but God in his nature itself reveals himself. He reveals himself in nature, and his laws are also revealed in nature. People understand. From the very beginning, Cain knew it was against the laws of God to kill Abel. He did it out of anger and out of a pitched a fit. Then he buries him. But they know that. If you go, let's go with me to Romans chapter 1. Might be a little more helpful. As a matter of fact, in the notes, I made a note where in our Constitution, when I was looking this up, laws of nature and the laws of God, in our Constitution, in Declaration of Independence, it says the phrase, the laws of nature and nature's God. And it was basing things on the laws of nature and nature's God. So there are nature's laws, and of course there are God's laws. Jesus summed up God's laws in Matthew 22. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind and all thy soul. Love thy neighbor as thyself. But there is laws that these men had that within themselves. And let's look at this. In chapter, if we go to chapter 2 and verse number, 13? Chapter 2. For not the hearers of the law are just before God, but the doers of the law shall be justified. Now, when he's talking now in verse 14 about the Gentiles, he's talking about those that are godless. Understand this. And he said, for when the Gentiles, which have not the law, do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are a law unto themselves. The law unto themselves, which show the work of the law, where? Written in their hearts. Remember the Bible says, he that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him is a sin. In other words, the laws of God were written upon man's hearts. In chapter 1, we find we're somewhere around 16. No, we got where Paul said, I'm not ashamed of the gospel. Then it says, for therein is written that God revealed from faith to faith unto the written, just shall live by faith. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it them. Now, how did God reveal himself to them? In other words, there really is no such thing as an atheist. It's a term people use, but in reality, it's kind of like you see tree huggers, you know. They go out and hug a tree. I have a friend that's that way. It sends me pictures of hugging a tree. But in reality, God created that tree. And God is within all of that, and he reveals himself in nature. He reveals himself to us in nature. And so for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse. Even if you don't know God and nobody's ever told you the gospel, you are without excuse because God has revealed himself in nature. The deepest people in Africa and the missionaries go and they try to win everybody they can, and there's always tribes that they can't get to, or families or people they can't get to, and they try to get into those people and move into there and see if they can win them, and they need the gospel, but nature itself cries out that there is a God. This is why they build sticks and make totem poles, or they build idols out of things to worship. They know that there's a God. Abimelech, this man says that I am a righteous nation. We are a righteous nation. In other words, they are a nation of laws. There is, what's the name of that? I think I wrote it down in here. The Code of Hammurabi was written in 1755. That's about 400 years after Abraham. He was the 6th king of Babylon, and they found evidence that he had laws written for the people. And so it is very detailed, the laws that he had. Adultery was one of the laws that was against man and against God. But they didn't know God, but they had established laws. And a nation without laws is not going to last long. And we have to be careful in America, because we need laws. He said unto me, she's my sister. And she even herself said, he's my brother. He said, with the integrity of my heart and the innocency of my hands, I have done this. I did not know it, is what he's telling God. I'm innocent of this. I did not know it. The integrity, Tom, means morally innocent. Innocency here means freedom from guilt. He says, I'm free from the guilt of this. And God said in him a dream, yea, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of the heart. For I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Now that's important. How does God help us? How does God move us and keep us from sinning against him? Well, I've written a couple things down. By his influence, men's minds, checking their inclination to sin. Temptation. We yield to temptation. And God comes in and takes that away from us and moves us away. If we're spiritually minded, He works with us in that fashion and keeps us from sin. He directs us and helps us and moves us from sin. And other times by His providence, taking away the opportunity. Taking away the opportunity. We are weak. You know, we look at Abraham, how strong he was. Abraham was weak. He's weak. This is the man that conquered a great enemy. And yet, in his weakness, he did this. And now God says, restore him his wife, because he's a prophet. And if you restore him his wife, he's a prophet, he'll pray for thee. And next week we'll see the prayer that Abraham offered up for this king and what it did for his family. But if you don't restore her, you're going to die. So, therefore he rose early. Now, I don't know, kings sometimes don't have to get up early, right? I retired in January 1st, 80 years old. I thought it was time to retire. And I retired January 1st, and I thought, man, I'm still going to be getting up at 4:15 in the morning. I think I slept till 7:30, and I was ashamed of myself. But kings don't get up early. But this one did. And he gathered the people around. And then he goes to Abraham and said, what have you done? What have you done? I don't know how Abraham had to feel about this big, you know, when this happened. Well, next week we'll finish this up and get into more of it. Thank you guys for being so faithful. Alan, thank you guys that came to the prayer breakfast. I stole, oh no, let me say that differently.